It is time for an all-new episode of Voices in the Game as we welcome you back, my friends, to another exciting episode with an extraordinary guest. I can't wait to get our conversation started with Mr. Kevin Smith. Kevin has done it all in the broadcasting industry and also the film industry as well, and he is currently a broadcasting and film professor at the University of Pittsburgh. Kevin, how are you, my friend? Thank you so much for coming on.
It's truly my pleasure. I'm a big fan of yours, Colton, and I admire the work you do. I'm inspired by your work quite often, and so this is an honor for me to be on your show. So thank you for having me.
Of course, Kevin, the honor and the pleasure is all mine, my friend. So, Kevin, I would love to get the party started. So, could you take us through your interest on your start in wanting to get into the broadcasting industry? And was the inspiration for you always to try to get into the sports side of the broadcasting business?
Great question. It actually started, I grew up with sports, obviously, from northern New Jersey. And I actually went to Pitt and played football at Pitt. So I had the pleasure of being in sports then. I was on, lucky to be on great teams back in the day with 5 Hall of Famers. And so I always loved sports, wanted to be in it, and had an interest in sports broadcasting. Of course, Pitt didn't have a program at the time, so I just had to kind of figure out my way. So I love what sports teaches you, everything about sports competition. My classes are all competitive, so everything you can imagine. And so, my whole life has been spent with sports, and then a transition from college after graduating. I got hired in New York City at a radio station, Z100. It was just signing on the air. Scott Shannon, who created he just retired. He's in all the history books now. He created the style of variety morning radio. It was called the Zoo formats, and he invented that. And he hired me as a sports director and doing the sports, as long as I worked in the mailroom too. Lesson to you kids: take the job when you get an opportunity. Take the job, right? And I was the youngest sports director in New York history, as a matter of fact. And so I got a chance to do the sports on the air, cover every sports team in New York, slept a good 4 hours a night at the most, right? But who knew the station in 72 days became the most listened to morning show in the country. And so suddenly we went from nobody knew we existed to national, just huge. Like, you cannot begin to see how huge. In fact, 3 years ago, Apple TV did a documentary on us on Z100 because it was legendary, and they changed radio. And it was a really great time in New York to be in radio with again, Howard Stern was on in the morning then, and Don Imus and all these legends, and it was great. It was competitive. And so the film part kicked in. I didn't know how to write scripts. Love film, like most people, And it just so happened that Diane English was driving through New York City, called up the radio station. Diane English is a big-time producer. She created Murphy Brown, The Golden Girls, some other shows, right? And she was listening to the morning show, and she needed somebody to be a disc jockey on a pilot episode of a TV series pilot she was doing for CBS called Foley Square. And I was the cheapest one in town because I was the youngest. And so I thought it was my friends pulling my leg, and I hung up on her. And she called back, said, "No, I'm serious about this." And okay, right. Send me the script. Next day, I got a FedEx of the script. And the next thing you know, I was on the pilot episode, the disc jockey on Foley Square on their pilot episode. Now, the series never got picked up. My fault. My bad. But that being said, I had a script on how to write feature films. And at that point, I'm like, I think I can do one of these things. And I was lucky enough to get great mentors. One of my best friends, my son's godmother in New York, is an actor and singer. And I went to a rap party with her and hung out with a guy watching a Knick game. And the guy happened to be a guy named Bruce Paltrow, who we just started talking. He became my first mentor. Bruce created TV shows like The White Shadow, Saint Elsewhere, which was one of my favorite dramas. Gwyneth is his daughter, by the way. But Bruce kind of took me under his wing. I was lucky enough to have him as a mentor. He passed away, unfortunately. But he was wonderful to get me going. I had a cousin that lived in England in a little hamlet next to Bath, and she's the babysit for a guy named Simon Ralph. He was a big movie producer. He became my next mentor. And then my final mentor, I worked as an executive producer of the Penguins, and I was writing scripts by then. And Howard Baldwin took me under his wing. Howard Baldwin owned the Pittsburgh Penguins. Howard's made, 39 films? He's out in Hollywood, and he's still my biggest mentor, and I'm lucky enough to have 6 projects with him right now. And so that's where it evolved. Like, that's how the film part came into my life.
And if I'm not mistaken, Kevin, Howard Baldwin was the owner of the Penguins too at one time.
Absolutely. Won a Stanley Cup with him, as a matter of fact. So yeah, we're close. We talk at least once every other week. And like I said, I have 6 projects with him now. And he and his wife, Karen, who's brilliant. And I'm lucky enough to still be very active in the film industry with the Pittsburgh Film Office and with Hollywood. And just, knock on wood, it's a hell of a ride.
Indeed, Kevin. And I would love to go back. I would love to go back to your time as a student. So, if I may ask, what years were you on Pitt's football team, and just what was that experience like? Because I know when you were playing, Pitt was one of the top teams in the country just coming off a national championship.
Yeah, I was 78 82. We were 2 years after the Tony Dorsett years in the championship. So my coach was Jackie Sherrill, phenomenal legend himself. But our coaching staff had everybody from Foch Fazio to Joe Moore was the line coach, who the offensive lineman of the year gets the Joe Moore Award, by the way. That's how great he was. Bob Davies was a graduate assistant, ended up coaching Notre Dame. I mean, our staff was incredible. But again, we went too deep with NFL players at every position. With Danny Marino being the year behind me and the star, but Russ Grimm, Hall of Famer, to Jimbo Covert, Hall of Famer, Ricky Jackson, Hall of Famer, Chris Dolman, Hall of Famer, plus the legendary Hugh Green. Like, our teams were incredible. And so my first year we were 8-4. It's so funny. You remember the losses. We lost to North Carolina State in the Tangerine Bowl. Bill Cowher was one of the stars of the team then. Him and Ted Brown, a running back, by the way. My next year we were 11-1. We lost that year at North Carolina 10-9. I don't remember the scores of the wins, ironically, but we lost 10-9 to North Carolina. North Carolina, their star was Lawrence Taylor. The next year we were 11-1 and lost at Florida State. And then the last year we were number 1 in the country, and then that's the legendary our home game, Penn State. We were up 14-0, and Penn State came back and won 48-14. But we ended up beating Georgia in the Sugar Bowl with that great pass from Dan Marino, John Brown. So I was lucky to be there during not only Pitt was not you have to remember, Penn State was just as good. And it hurts me to say that, but the bottom line is we were the Alabama Georgias of the world back then. And West Virginia was really good. Darryl Talley, Jeff Hostetler and all those guys. Football was phenomenal. The WPIAL those rosters were made up of all WPIL kids just about, and our team half from the South because of Jackie. But the football was at a level that it's almost hard to describe. And everybody was NFL caliber. It was remarkable to see. So I was really blessed to just be involved with that squad.
What was the most memorable win, Kevin, that you remember being on the sidelines for?
The Sugar Bowl, without a doubt. That was my last game. And I was standing, this is so interesting because that last play, Danny was remarkable. I mean, he's a dear friend and just remarkable. And we're losing. And I stand next to Troy Hill, who's a D-back, and he and I used to stand next to each other, fellow Jerseyite. And I was standing right by Jackie Sherrill, and our offensive coordinator at the time was Andy Urbanik. And they're talking to Danny, and you can hear them say, "What do you think?" And he goes, "We didn't come here for a tie." I cleaned up the language, of course. But at that point, Andy gave Danny, like, if they line up in this defense, these plays work. If they line up this defense, this plays work. Danny said, "Gotcha." And 37-yard pass to John Brown, tight end, which is it's a remarkable pass. But to me, that was a dream come true. That was as great as it gets. I'd always dreamt of playing in the Sugar Bowl and to have it end that way. That was phenomenal.
What was it like for you, Kevin, being a student at the same time while also being an athlete for a Division I football program, and not to mention one of the best Division I football programs at the time?
Yeah, Of course, it's hard. It's a full-time job, but it's not. I find that fascinating to ask that because, again, as a teacher now, I'm on the other side of it. And so I was talking to one of my teaching assistants today for this upcoming semester, and my class, I have three classes, and one of my class roster, I have half the volleyball team, which is fun. You know, Olivia Babcock and the gang. And I love when I have student athletes. I have another new class, which is an NIL class, which I'll be teaching, which is going to be a lot of fun. So it's all athletes. And to understand, you never have to. Here's what you know. You never have to worry about a student athlete academically. There's a stereotype and a stigma where people think like, oh yeah, they blow off stuff or they get this. It's the exact opposite because everything is so scheduled and regimented that you know where you're going to be every second of a day, not just for the school year, but for all but 3 weeks out of the year when you get to actually go home. My son's in that world right now at another university. And the beauty of it is the discipline that these kids have, they got to get stuff done and they know it. And so they just get it done. And that's kind of the mentality I had. You know, you had to be back then, Pitt Stadium up in the morning to go get treatment and then go to breakfast, go to class, go to team meetings, work out. Then go on the field, practice, training table, do your homework, study film, go to bed, rinse and repeat. And you know, if you're lucky, you got a game on a Saturday type thing. That's what your life is. And so you don't feel like you're missing out on anything because you get to play. Like you get to actually play a sport. And so as a student athlete, it's challenging, but at the same time, you're living a dream and you never forget that you're living a dream. That not once. And you cover student athlete. I mean, that's what you do, you know, with countless student athletes. And it doesn't matter D1, D2, D3, your schedule's the same. And you get to see that. And the one thing about student athletes is the fact that you are driven and you're competitive and you're disciplined. So you don't do bad in class. Like nobody does bad in classes, student athletes. It's incredibly rare. So yeah, it's fun. It was fun.
And then fast forwarding, Kevin, to your time, like you mentioned, going to New York City. How did it feel for you to go to the #1 media market in the country right out of the gate after you received your diploma from Pitt?
Shocking. You know, it was a huge learning curve. I grew up in northern New Jersey, went to a school called Seton Hall Prep. Yes, we're proud because we have a pipeline to Pitt. As a matter of fact, my coach had got his graduate degree. Tony, he's passed away. He was winning his coach in Jersey. I got to give some props to my boys. My classmates that I graduated with included a kid named Chet Parlavecchio, who was a captain of the Penn State team. He was a linebacker. One of my good friends, a guy named Tom Verducci, who you see on MLB. We graduated from high school together. We're very close and good friends. He's phenomenal. So my high school, but after me, my recruit was a guy named Tony Woods, who ended up playing for Pitt and then Seattle. His recruit was Roman Matthews, who played for Pitt and the Chicago Bears, who I get a chance to see Rome from time to time. They also recruited, Ashton Gibbs. And then, why am I blank? His name was retired at Pitt, the basketball player, point guard. Why am I blank? I'll come up with it in a minute. But yeah, no, they're all from my high school. And so we've always had a wonderful pipeline. So growing up in the New York metro area, you understand sports. Like sports is part of everybody's life. That's just part of it, right? Men, women, doesn't matter. So to take a gig like that out of college, it was, you don't really realize what you're getting yourself into. But at the same time, you understood the opportunity that was presented to you. So to me, it was like playing sports. You know, I didn't care if I got 4 hours of sleep a night. That was irrelevant to me. I didn't worry about food or anything because when you cover sporting events back then, they feed you. So that was like, okay, great. I can always take stuff home, right? And to have that, I knew that was the great opportunity coming out. And then, of course, the station going to #1 in the country. And then every Friday we'd have musical guests come up with and do the show with us. So then next thing you know, I'm friends with everybody from Stevie Wonder did the show, Billy Joel, like you name it. Every human being that existed in music did the show with us. So I would become friends with their managers and the record companies. Tommy Mottola, who ran at the time, he was a record rep for Sony Arista. Now he runs the company. These are all people I dealt with through the beginning of my career for the first 4 years of my career. And so I knew the opportunity I had both in the world of sports and in the world of entertainment. It was, and then next thing you know, doing the Diane English's pilot, the world was opening up to me for all kinds of options. And it's because of just the same work ethic any student athlete has. It's show me where it is. I'll show up. Let me know.
And like you mentioned, Kevin, how were you able to grow it when you were there? Because it just seemed like you guys just skyrocketed when you were there.
Yeah, it's interesting because our anniversary, the 42nd anniversary of Z100 was on August 2nd of the Morning Zoo. And we still keep in touch. One of us has passed away, Jerry Nelson from the morning show, but Scott Shannon, who sent me, we just wrote each other, and all the folks on the morning show, Claire Stevens, John Bell, Anita Benita, Ross Britton. It was 6 of us did the show at the same time. It was a variety show with music and all kinds of stuff. I learned from the best. Scott Shannon's literally in the history books. I mean, he's in the Hall of Fame, for radio. And so I got a chance to have a front row seat right out of college with a Hall of Famer, just like I had with Dan Marino and with Jimbo and with Ricky Jackson. So my entire career was around people who are Hall of Fame in their industry. Even the evening DJ that we had at the time, a guy named Hollywood Hamilton, he went into the Hall of Fame, Radio Hall of Fame about 5 years ago. So all the people I was around in the business were all literally Hall of Fame caliber. And to understand the work ethic and the creativity of a Hall of Famer, they're all geniuses and they're all smart, but their work ethic is second to none. And when you see that from the time, I saw that when I was a little kid from my family, but when you see it in your formative years, college and then in your professional world, you understand what it takes to get to that level. And so for me, I just had again, role models and people who I can get inspired by every step of the way. So that's how I grew, and to see what it took for anything going forward in my careers, I was able to steal it from all of them.
And what were your roles then as the sports director at the station?
Yeah, that's easy. So I would be on the air doing the morning sports. You can go find me. If you trust me, you can Google Z100. My on-air name was Captain Kevin, simply because I was the captain of all our sports teams the softball team. Yeah, so it's not but so I would have to write the sports, be on the air at the sports. Then we would write the comedy skits together and do the comedy skits off, when the show was over. Then I would have to work in the mailroom during the day. So because, I think that was like a hazing thing that Scott wanted me to go through to see how bad I wanted this. But next thing you know, I'm running over to Arista Records, picking up, back then, they were records. And you'd have to pick up like the latest record or drop something off. So I'd go to the record companies, and then I would grab a bite to eat. Then I would cover the sports in New York, whatever sport was. So every night I was at a sporting event, whether it was the New Jersey Nets, the Knicks, mainly. I was more at the Nets. The Mets were great back then for some reason. The Yankees were average. But I was at sporting events, and then I'd get interviews so that I can use them the next day in the air, and take a power nap and be back at the station by 4:30 in the morning.
Any particular game stand out for you when you were in New York that you remember the most covering?
Yes. That's a great question. Game 7 of the 1986 World Series, where the Mets won. It was the game after the Bill Buckner game. And Scott Shane and I both Scott came along to me. He was kind enough to get us a limo to go to the game, by the way. So thank you, Scott. But yeah, that was dope. That was incredible. So they were losing 3-0. Strawberry hit the home run. So to cover a World Series Game 7 was pretty freaking cool. And then the other fun thing, this may sound weird, they sent me down to Dream Week to spend a week down there and do reports with the Mets Dream Week. It was like their first one they ever had. And so that's fun. You get to play against a bunch of old guys. I was the youngest guy there. So, thinking I can actually play. But that being said, I think the coolest thing, we actually, back then, the Mets Dream Week played against the Orioles Dream Week guys. and it was a morning game, but there was fog, so we couldn't take the field. So everybody's hanging out in the locker room. So Brooks Robinson, all these dudes were there that were legends of the game, just hanging out. And I sat down and just hung out with those guys and just listened to their stories. That stood out to me more than you can imagine. Like, I was like, oh, this is freaking unbelievable, right? And so those are the things I kind of like. So the storytelling aspect, I had that my whole life since I was a kid because of the people in my life. But, I was collecting people still and being able to collect their stories. So those are my two, of the two sporting events, those are the two things that stood out to me in my Z100 years.
And backpedaling a little bit, Kevin, who were those storytellers, that you mentioned that you had growing up?
So so this is going to sound nuts. So my father passed away when I was a teenager, right? Cancer, which luckily I learned a lot from him. But his brother helped raise me with my mother. And his brother happened to be one of Jersey's most famous people. He's passed away a while ago, but Dr. J. Harry Smith. And Dr. J. Harry Smith was a Tuskegee Airman. My father was in the military too, but he was Tuskegee Airman. He was the first black baseball player at Seton Hall University. He was the first black student at Georgetown Law School. He actually, when he was a first-year law student, sued the New Jersey governor and the federal government to integrate the National Guard in New Jersey, represented himself, won the lawsuit. And so he integrated the National Guard. He became the first black president of a college in New Jersey, the first black mayor of our town, Maplewood, New Jersey. And his friends from Tuskegee, for example, he had 3 daughters. And his friends, I would sit at his dining room table a lot of times when they would come up like for after dinner and they would be playing cards. And I would just sit in the corner and listen. And his friends were the first black adjunct general, who's my cousin, his oldest daughter's godfather. And another friend that would be there all the time is John Houston. And his daughter would babysit his 3 girls. And his daughter happened to be a young lady named Whitney Houston, the singer. And her father was one of my uncle's best friends. They were Tuskegee Airmen together. And he lived in northern New Jersey. And so I grew up with them. And then you add in all the people that he would be around. What's his name? God, why am I blanking his name? But he gave me my first set of golf clubs. He was Muhammad Ali's mentor, and he was a teacher. So he introduced me to Muhammad Ali. And my uncle would take me and just literally call me up and just say, dress in a beautiful baritone voice, dress in a suit. I'm picking you up at 8 a.m. Okay, great. I would never ask why, right? And next thing you know, we were having breakfast on the windows of the world, top of the Trade Center with Desmond Tutu, or we'd be out golfing with the first black professional golfer. Like, that was his world. And so he would always include me in all of that. And I would just listen and learn from their stories. And it's amazing because the past can teach you a remarkable amount. And so that's where I kind of got the storytelling aspect of my life from the earliest times I can remember. That's what I was exposed to literally almost every other day.
And, with that remarkable story, Kevin, with this being more towards a sports podcast, I was wondering, what were your first impressions of Muhammad Ali when you first met him?
Remarkable. It's funny. What am I blanking his name? He was a sportscaster.
Erica?
No. I'll have to ask my cousin. This is going to sound so funny because back in the 70s, there was a Saturday morning cartoon about Muhammad Ali. Just like Bugs Bunny and that stuff. There was a Saturday morning Muhammad Ali cartoon. And one of the characters was the guy that introduced me to my uncle's friend. And why am I blank on him? But he's bigger than what I expected. He's a big dude. I got to look up. Hold on a second.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it now too, Kevin.
I got to find that. The Muhammad Ali cartoon on Saturday mornings.
Yeah, I'm trying to see.
Frank Bannister. Yeah, so Frank Bannister, right? And in the cartoon, he's known as Bannister. But Frank Bannister, if you look up Frank Bannister, sports broadcaster, he's passed away a long time ago. Yeah. Yeah, he became the first African American closed circuit announcer to a heavyweight championship fight. So, he was a great dude, man. Frank Bannister. And what was cool about Mr. Bannister, and then I'll tell you another wild story. Hold on. This is Mr. Bannister. He's a light-skinned black guy. Um, but yeah, so that was my exposure there. But then the other end of my world was music, which ironically ended up in that. And it just so happened my godmother, Dolores Benjamin, lived across the street from us on my little tiny street in Crestview Avenue. She lived like a block down across the street. My sister and I were latchkey kids. Parents were working. We were kids. We'd come home from Little St. Joe's School in Maplewood, New Jersey, and we'd go over to my aunt Dee's house. And my sister would sit in the kitchen with her, and they do whatever things. Well, I was young, 7, 8 years old, and I would go down in their game room, and her husband, Joe Benjamin, he had this like little flat stage with mirrors on the wall, and it was an upright bass, and he would be playing the upright bass. He was a musician, and when he would take a break, he would come and teach me how to play chess, and I would sit there on the sofa and watch him practice for hours. And he was in a band, and when he traveled around the world with his band, his big band, he would always come back and bring me a hat from wherever, which I have all my hats still, and my sister a doll. But when his band would be playing in northern New Jersey or New York City, we'd get dressed up and go. All of us, the family, right? And we'd sit in the front row. And again, we're talking, I'm 7, 8 years old. And after the show, we'd go backstage to see Uncle Joe. And the conductor of the band would sit me on one side of him and my sister on the other on the piano bench and play the piano backstage, the warm-up piano. And he played backstage, and he taught me how to play chords, especially jazz chords, dan, 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 like all that stuff like that. So he was my first piano teacher, really. And he would fill in the middle part. And my sister, oh, that's the nicest old man. I love that guy, right? Little did we know that it happened to be a guy named Duke Ellington. And that's who taught me how to play the piano, is Duke Ellington, one of the most famous performers. And Uncle Joe was the upright bass player for Duke Ellington. And that's who taught me. And Uncle Joe passed away in a car wreck in 75 when I was 15, I think. But yeah, no. So like my whole life just has this weird connection. It's kind of like a Walter Mitty-ish thing, type thing. And I guess this generation would call it a Forrest Gump type thing. But I was always like right there when all this stuff would happen. Nancy, my son's godmother, I mentioned earlier, the actor in New York. Her father, he's passed away 4 years ago, 5 years ago. General Edward Meyer, he was the Army Chief of Staff. So I was very close. I used to go on vacation with their family. I was very close to him and see that world. And her roommate in college, who's a dear friend of mine, is Gay Willis, who was the lead in the Phantom of the Opera in Broadway and traveled with Michael Crawford. So I'm part of that world. And so my whole world has always been in sports, music, entertainment, from the time I can remember, of all these people that have always been in my life. And they just keep coming in my life. So that's why I kind of gravitate toward the storytelling part of from the film industry, where it's just natural for me because that's what I've been exposed to.
Yeah, that's all absolutely remarkable, Kevin. And yes, we are going to definitely talk about your time in the film industry a little later on. But I was curious, how did the opportunity come for you to work for the Penguins in the mid-90s as the executive producer for Penn's Confidential, Penn's Confidential?
Yeah, Penn's Confidential. Wow, yeah, good. Wow, you did your homework. Yeah, so at that point, I had a background in newspaper writing, radio, all kinds of different media. And I was at WTAE. I was a producer, writer, and then on air doing sports. And Cindy Himes, who's still with the Penguins, she's the longest tenured female in the NHL, as a matter of fact. I've known her, and Howard Baldwin owned the team. Now, the problem was back then the team didn't own their rights. It was KBL that owned the rights, the television rights for broadcasting, and they didn't own the Civic Arena, which is where they used to play before PPG Paints Arena. And so they basically had reached their ceiling on how to monetize anything involving the team. And so Cindy reached out to me and had me meet with Howard Baldwin and I want to say, is it Tim Ryan, the CEO of the team at the time? and they picked my brain on like, how do we make money on this? And I'm like, create your own content. And so they said, am I capable of doing that? And I said, yeah, I can do that. And in fact, you can make more money not only if you had a half hour weekly show that ran on TV stations, you may have to buy the airtime, but now you can sell the commercial time. And it can be in different markets. So, it offset the cost of being on the air. You can barter out, and all that stuff. So, I negotiated that with a bunch of stations. And it was a half hour magazine show, all different sponsorable segments type thing. And then they asked me to redesign their in-game activity so that the same thing can happen in-game, as opposed to just playing music, to turn it into how do you make money on the Jumbotron? How do you make money doing this? And so that's where they had me come and do that. The show won a bunch of awards, and that was it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
And it really seemed, Kevin, that, having teams create their own content it seemed like that was revolutionary at that time, knowing that cable TV was in the boom period. It just, like, do you think it was really revolutionary for the time?
100%. The tell was the second year we were doing it. So I like to push the envelope type thing. So we did a music video. I decided, let's do a music video. I got the guys, the Steelers song, Here We Go, those guys. And I said, can you do the Penguins and update the Penguins song using the same thing, but give me a more modern thing. And so they did. They were cool as hell. And then I said to my crew, now let's cut a music video. But the music video, let's make it so that there's different celebrities that sing the different parts of the music video, right? And so we went around and did this, and we were smart enough to go around to the different TV stations and have the sportscasters back in the day, John Fedko, Sam Nover, Steigerwald, all those guys, Pompiani, like we put them in it. But then I went over to Myron Cope. I had worked with the TAE. I was good friends with Myron. So we went over to his house, and Myron's in it, the legendary Myron Cope. But then we got Mr. Rogers to be in it. And you can go watch it I'll find it for you. You can YouTube it and watch it. It's crazy. I've had a chance to work with him twice. He was so fun. And he's in the music video. And then we got like Jerome Bettis. We started getting all these people that were in the music video, and we debuted it on the Jumbotron during a game. The place went bananas, like especially with the Mr. Rogers part. Like when you see what he did, it's fantastic. And it was really cool, right? Place went nuts. Within a couple of days, I started getting calls from the different NHL teams like, okay, how did you do this? What are you doing? So the Florida Panthers started mimicking us. The Buffalo Sabres sent the crew down to follow my crew around for a week. And they actually bought some of our stuff that we created that they took up there and got sponsored. So what the second year was when we realized from the TV show content, the NHL that was the first ever show that the NHL on anything NHL, like they didn't have like, This Week in Baseball and stuff like that, which I grew up with. That's the first time that ever happened. And so, that really changed a lot of things. I mean, it made hundreds of thousands of dollars just to show just for the team. And the players were great. They really helped out, because they allowed us to have access.
What was Mr. Rogers' first reaction, Kevin, when you asked him if he can be in the music video?
He's a hockey junkie. And he was actually, you may not know this, he was named the Pittsburgh's honorary captain of the Penguins, and they actually gave him a team sweater and the whole works. So he was all in. And we took the song up to him, and it was so fun. Like I said, I've worked with him on two different occasions, especially involving the Penguins, on two different occasions. When I designed Mario Lemieux night, his first retirement night, that was beyond fun. But that when we took the music video to him, the idea that we had was the song would be playing, and then during the catchphrase, the refrain, he would pop his head out of the little tree that he had, that he would open up and he would sing the phrase, like, let's go Pens. He would say the phrase. And his crew shot it. We shot over at QED at the stage there, and his crew is there, my crew is there. He was so fun and so nice, but so funny that we actually had to stop shooting for 15 minutes because the crew was laughing so hard we were doubled over. That to me, working with him, he lived up to everything you would hope for and exceeded every time I had a chance to be around him, especially the 2 times I worked with him. I'm his biggest fan because he truly is exactly what you say, like 100%. And when you're with him, he's even funny. He's really funny. He's self-deprecating funny. And I adore Mr. Rogers, and but that was great. And again, you can see the music video, especially the Mr. Rogers part.
I will definitely be watching that when
Yeah.
we get off of this interview. And like you said, Kevin, one of the episodes for Penn's Confidential that you did was with Mario Lemieux's first retirement in 1997. So, what was that experience like for you and your team getting to create it, knowing that at the time he was already considered one of the greatest to ever step on an ice rink?
That's a great question. That may be one of the most fun projects I've ever had to work on. And there's only one regret I have about the whole thing when you look back and I'm like, fuck, shit, oh, excuse me. Darn, I should have done that. But so we knew he was going to retire. So we had the whole summer. And so we started thinking about how are we going to do this to make it a unique event, like really special. So we said, first of all, it's going to be I wanted to do it as a separate night, but the Penguins decided to do it during it's called a D game, which is not a lot of people showing up. So that way you get more people showing up. Makes sense if you're marketing. So I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to, number one, get Mario Lemieux messages that'll run on the Jumbotron during every break. And the messages are going to come from all kinds of people in the sports world and different people, but also from his heroes. So during the summer, my crew and I went up to Canada. We went up to a card show, and his Mario Lemieux's, his hero is John Beliveau, and he was at the card show. So we got John Beliveau to give a message. Maurice Richard was there, as a matter of fact, maybe a year before he died. He was in bad shape. So we had Jean Beliveau, Guy Lafleur, and then we got Michael Jordan, Dan Marino, Gretzky. I went down to Arnold Palmer's place, and Arnie did a message to him. Mr. Rogers sat down at the piano and not only did a message in English, but also did it in French. And so we played that. Yeah, it's phenomenal, right? Because he speaks French. And we had people from all walks of life, the Steelers, you name it. I actually called up Pierre Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada at the time. His son's the Prime Minister. But I literally called up the Prime Minister's office, and you're not going to believe this. They actually patched me through to the Prime Minister. Swear, because I said it was for Mario Lemieux. And he said, absolutely. I asked him to come down to it. He goes, he was booked already. And he goes, I'll send a message. And 2 days later, we got a message from him, wishing Mario Lemieux, good luck. So it was really cool to get those messages. So that was one part of it. The other part was we had the Hall of Fame bring down every trophy. And we put them on the ice and did a laser show with them. And then, of course, we had the banner made and raised the banner. The challenge that we had come up with was, I got to get a gift for him, like from the organization. Couldn't figure out what for the longest time because he has everything. I was lucky enough to have been to Mario's house a couple of times, and he has a beautiful wine cellar in his basement, right? And I said, oh, I know what to get him. So I had a place in California made a custom Magnum bottle of wine, of his favorite wine, and it's engraved. It's actually etched with him from the on the ice waving goodbye his last game at the time, and then some stats and stuff like that, and then they shipped it in, and that was his gift from the team, which he still has, and he loved that. And then the last thing that we did was that night, and this was cool because this is the local police did this. I got a police escort for him to come to the game because we sent 2 limos out for his family. His parents were in, his brother, and all his brothers and all stuff like that. So I said, okay, Sewickley, that's not far, 65. You just take it into the city to the old Civic Arena. So we got 2 limos, and I got the cops from Sewickley to give us escort. But what I didn't know was they told the other police departments. So every time they went to a different town, 2 more police would join the escort. And so by the time he had like a 20-car police escort coming into the Civic Arena, and he told me that Austin, his son, thought it was the greatest thing ever with all the lights and everything. But the only regret I have was at the end, uh, they present Mario his jersey because he was in a suit, and they present his jersey, takes off his jacket, and puts on his jersey slash sweater in the hockey world, and he's waving to everybody. And what I should have done is I should have had Eddie Johnson, EJ, who was the person who drafted him, with the premier choice, the Pittsburgh Penguins select number 66, Mario Lemieux, as he says in the thing. And Mario wouldn't put on his sweater at the draft because they couldn't come with the negotiating price yet. And I'm like, here's where the chance is to make this better. And I realized that literally the moment he put his sweater on, I went, son of a bitch. I should have had EJ hand him the sweater because that is the full circle moment. And that's the one thing I would change that whole night. That's literally the only thing I'd change. But aside from that, that was one of the coolest things I've had a chance to produce. Plus, it was a global, you had to work with the TV stations for the camera angles. And it was, it wasn't just, you're not talking just Pittsburgh, you're talking global production type thing. So that was really fun. That was a fun production.
Yeah, that seems phenomenal, Kevin. And then one more thing about the Penguins, and it kind of ties into the film industry. One of I feel, the hidden gems in Pittsburgh sports history is the film that Howard Baldwin got to produce with that hockey team that he owned called Sudden
Death, baby. That's right. Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Did you work on that film at all? I was wondering if you did, since you were in the film industry.
No, I wish I did. It's funny. Howard started many, many careers. Howard Baldwin's a great guy, man. It's hard to describe how wonderful he is, and his wife, Karen. That was his first film. Interestingly enough, that was also Don Keyser, the executive director of the Pittsburgh Film Office, who's one of the most remarkable people in the industry. That was her first film in Pittsburgh that she worked on too. So that's a little tie there. But no, I wish I did. Howard Baldwin started, obviously, myself in the industry, but he also started a young man who named David E. Kelly. And David E. Kelly's dad, Mr. Jack Kelly, had coached for Howard when he owned the Whalers, New England Whalers of the World Hockey Association. He was a Providence head coach. And he came and he brought him to be a vice president of the Penguins. And his one son, David, was a lawyer. And Mark, the other son, was a scout for the Penguins. He was their European scout. And David loved hockey, but he loved writing. Howard got him into the industry, and now David's probably one of the most powerful and influential people in the industry. You've seen many of his TV shows, from Picket Fences, which he created, to Ally McBeal, which he created, to Boston Legal, which he created, to Big Sky, which he created. He wrote the film From the Hip, starring Judd Nelson. So Howard is that generous, where it's never, he's a winner. And he has that work ethic too. Trust me, I'd be there late at night. I wander in his office at midnight. He's still there. That's how I got to know him. So he has that same thing that Scott Shannon had, that Danny Marino and all them dudes had. Again, that's the compass of my life. These are the people I'm exposed to. And you'd be a fool if you didn't watch and learn from them. And so that's what I learned from all these various people. So that's a good question.
What were the biggest things that you saw firsthand, Kevin, that Howard Baldwin did that people might not see when owning a professional sports team?
That's a good question. His introductory press conference, and I'll be very honest. So we're at the Civic Arena, and I'm covering his introductory press conference. And the locals, because he wasn't from like Pittsburgh, they're somewhat provincial here and reluctant to change. That's in any kind of town. That happens. If you're in Buffalo, same thing would happen, right? But the broadcasters were giving him crap that if you're going to sell the team, I'll bet you $100 in a year. They're actually saying that at a press conference to him. And at the end of the press conference, I just walked up to him and I literally did a quick interview, nothing major. And then I said, I'm so happy somebody from outside of Pittsburgh bought this team. I'm excited for you to own this team because you're going to bring fresh perspective. And he was really appreciative. In fact, he reminds me of that conversation when we talking, obviously when I lived in LA, we'd have lunch all the time and get together. But to understand that guy brought a Stanley Cup to this team. It's first. And to, you're talking hockey back then, where the majority of their money came from trading cards, for God's sake, and stuff like they didn't have income, and to be able to keep Mario Lemieux here for his career, when the team was in dire straits, he could have sold him off and killed all the debt. But it was more important for Mario to be here for Pittsburgh. Mario wanted to be here, and Howard wouldn't do that to Pittsburgh. And so to understand the sacrifices that man made and the money he turned away just so that can happen. Because again, trust me, Montreal would have paid off all of Pittsburgh's debts if they could have gotten Mario Lemieux on their team. I can guarantee you that. And he wouldn't let it happen, even though he knew, financially this could lead to ruin. Now he sold the team, and of course, Mario would become part of the ownership group, and Mario saved the team along with the other owners. But that was going on long before the team would file for bankruptcy. That was going on long before that. And so, he not only gave us a Stanley Cup, but last time I checked, the team's still downtown.
I think it is too.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And then shifting gears, Kevin, to your time at WTAE, what was it like juggling all the different roles you did as a writer, as a producer, and as an on-air talent?
I'm the luckiest guy in the world. Think about this. I'm in the sports department, and the sports department at TAE at the time was Bill Hillgrove, Stan Savrin, Myron Cope, Albie Oxenrider, Guy Junker. Think about that. That's like a Mount Rushmore thing going on right there, right? And to watch them and how smooth and expert they were. And also my best friend from TAE is Sally Wiggin, who we're still best buds, and she comes and works with my students all the time. And I'm still very good friends. Deb Cassini-Klein, who was a producer there, won 7 Emmys, again, to be around Bill, like Hillgrove's, that's a Hall of Famer, right? Myron, these are legends type thing, you know what I mean? And so to see them every single day and to learn, trust me, I would screw up early on, and they would give me shit. They would get on my ass about it, which rightly so, right? Because they demanded perfection, but they were fair. Here's how great Bill Hillgrove was, and I'll tell you how great Myron. So Myron was just the coolest dude. But here's how great Bill Hillgrove was. Bill Hillgrove, Friday nights, especially back then, high school football led the news. Like the biggest games were the lead stories on Friday nights on all the TV stations. By the way, the Penguins wouldn't schedule Friday night home games because they didn't want to go up against high school football. That's how big high school football was back then. But Bill would do the 6 o'clock news. So at 6:30, Bill, he knows he's going to be there till late. He would skate out to meet some friends and grab something to eat at a place called Hetherington's, right over in Swissvale, Churchill area. It's no longer there. So we're getting all the editing and doing all this stuff because it's hectic, because we know we have the leading the sports and we have an extended sports, all that stuff's going on. Bill would show back up right about 8 o'clock with a big plate of wings and put them in the middle of the newsroom and goes, "It's tailgating time," just to get everybody's spirits up for that. And this is a guy that's been in the industry forever. That guy, if you want to see how you should treat people in the office place, that's the dude you watch. That's how great he was, let alone just the talent. That's the kind of human being Bill Hillgrove is. And so learning to see how he treated people when he is the top dog in a market, that's a learning experience that is priceless, right? And then Myron was the same way. I would sit with Myron in TA Radio. Was on the first floor of the building over in Ardmore Boulevard, right? And his radio show would start at 6:30. So I would finish doing the newscast, the sportscast, and at about 10 minutes later, I'd go down and sit literally across from Myron while he's doing the radio broadcast. And every now and then, he'd include me in there, like every now and then. But let me tell you, and that was Myron at all times. Like that was Myron. And, I did some promotions with him. The one thing I know about going anywhere with Myron, he will never, ever, ever he never bought a drink his entire life. If you go into a bar or promotion place with him, every human being buys a drink for him because they're like, I brought Myron Cope a drink. Honest to God. It was crazy, right? Unbelievably down to earth. Like just he and Hillgrove, like these are the biggest names in Pittsburgh sports. You could not find two guys that were just Joe Schmo normal people. They were just the best. And Pompiani's that way too, by the way. Pump's that way. Richie Walsh, he's a super dude too. But I'm so proud to say that I had a chance to not only work with them, but even my colleagues at the other stations. That's the kind of people they were. Rob King, who, is one of my best friends on the planet. That's who these people are. And to see that their success, you just cheer for people like that at all times because they're that nice.
Yes, indeed, Kevin, and hearing your stories about that, I've had the chance to work with Bill Hillgrove. I've had the chance to interact with Rob King, and that all is 1,000% true.
Absolutely. And I know, and you and I have mutual friends, Mike Clark, who
I love Mike to death.
And Mike, I mean, think about how people don't understand, Mike as what he's given to Pittsburgh, to teaching at Duquesne, to that man. He may be the most generous human being I've ever met in my life. And he's just so sweet. And again, I know you've had a chance to learn from them too. And you learn the technical stuff, but more importantly, you get to see the people they are. And that's where you're going to learn the most, in my opinion. At least that's what I have had a chance to do. And Mike's right there with Bill and Rob and all those other guys.
Yes, that all is 1,000% true, Kevin. And moving on to your time at FSN Pittsburgh, when you were there as a producer, there were a few key moments when you were there producing the pre and the post-game show for the Penguins and the Pirates. The ones that come to mind, December 27th, 2000, a day that will always live in the hearts of Pittsburgh sports history with Mario's return, and then the Pirates moved to PNC Park a few months later in 2001. So how would it feel for you to be a part of bringing those moments to life for every Penguin and Pirate fan when you were a producer there? Because with Lemieux's return in 2000, I actually had the Penguins Classic DVD of the FSM broadcast with Mike and Eddie on the call for that game. And that was a game I would literally watch over and over and over again.
100%. That's so cool that you say that. So, no matter what, and this is what makes you so good on the air. You do your job as a broadcaster, but you're still a fan, and that excitement, you could hear the excitement. So for me, when I'm watching a game, I want the broadcasters to be just like, oh my God, it's the dream opportunity. They're at a freaking sporting event. And they get to see the sporting event, and they get the call. Like, you have that, and you have that great talent, and that's what it was, producing those things. Having worked at the Penguins at TA, I knew Mario. I know him well, and I know everybody involved, and so I got a lot of heads up. As somebody that's older in the industry now, at that point a little bit older, I would get a lot of heads up when stuff would happen, and so. The other half of that is this is going to sound crazy. So and this is a great, it's the networking part, which I try to teach my students. Networking is everything, right? One of my best friends is Christine Simpson. And I don't know if you ever met Chris. She's like Canada's one of their top ever broadcasters. She's kind of like the, like when they have the Olympics, she's the host of the Molson House. She is on Rogers Sportsnet, so she's a hockey aficionado. She's the first woman to ever do rinkside reporting that you see now all the time for ABC when they first carried hockey. She's one of my best friends. And what makes Chris so unique is she's brilliant. I mean, she's crazy intelligent, but her brother was the Penguins' first round pick the year before Mario, Craig Simpson. And so she's woven in to the Penguins. Ironically, Craig was traded to Edmonton and he was Gretzky's roommate. So she's woven in to the Gretzky and all them dudes, right? So I would give Chris a heads up and she would give me heads up when stuff was breaking. So I always had access to everybody from Mario to, if I literally had picked Chris up at the airport a couple of times because of a breaking story, we went straight to Mario's house. So she can do an interview for Canada while I would get him for, anything going on around here. And so because of that, I got to really kind of know what's going on. So the excitement would build. And him coming back, as we all know, that was against Toronto, right? And I believe he had a goal and an assist in that game.
Yes, he did. Well, Yager got the first goal, and Lemieux got an assist there, and
got unassisted. Yeah.
Yes. Mario got the assist, and Mario got a goal, but I think it was like the third or the fourth goal. I'll have to go back and watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that I remember the most is that the build up to that game was on a global scale ridiculous. Was ridiculous. And it was, it's funny because Jay Caulfield was the one working him out and nobody knew, getting him ready. And Jay's just a terrific guy. But it was so wild because I found out later, where he was working him out and all this stuff like that. And the buildup, because again, it wasn't just a Pittsburgh thing. That was global, international level. Like that's a one-off. That rarely happens. And if you remember the pregame skate, when he stepped on the ice for the pregame skate and the place was losing its mind at that point. And then he got the assist. And it was almost like, cool, he got an assist. And he looked like he was moving in slow motion the whole game anyway. But it's like, okay, cool, he got an assist. When he got the goal, it was almost like that weird thing where you sit there and you go, if he can stop now and not play again. He just handed everybody what they would hope he could do. And it was one of those rare moments where you get a chance to see, I had a chance to see him in his heyday, and then to see him at the end of the career where he could still be great. Like it's just amazing that the buildup was great. I'll never forget that. You're 100% right. And trust me, I covered the Pirates when they lost to the Braves in the NLCS. I was standing right behind home plate with the media watching Sid Bream slide in ahead of that throw from Barry Bonds in left field. That, trust me, that's one of that thing's etched in my mind, to go from watching people tear down all the stuff in the locker room, run down a hallway to the Braves locker room, and then none of the Pirates wanted to go live after the game, which Tom Glavine was kind enough to do so with me, but he wouldn't stand in front of the Pirates locker room because it was disrespectful. Like there's so many things you see where you see history happen, sports history, and you realize it while it's going on, but you're doing your job, but you do reflect on it that's right afterwards. It's not like years later. You reflect on it and go, holy crap. Like, I got a chance to see that. That's crazy. And to feel it. Because it's one thing to see it. You can feel it. Like you can feel the emotion of people. You can feel that stadium. I thought the stadium was going to collapse because people were losing their minds in Atlanta in that game. You can feel everything around you. And to go into the Pirates locker room finally, and these guys they were a game away from the World Series. And to see the devastation, I remember that feeling, trust me, against Penn State. But this was even more so because that was their moment, and they knew that was it. Like that was the shot, and that was incredible to see. And again, to see what that swing of emotion, that's the human experience.
And going back, Kevin, to that October night in Georgia that so many Pirate fans remember. How was Barry Bonds in the locker room knowing that was his last ever game he would ever put on a Pirate uniform? If you're allowed to say.
Yeah. He wasn't doing any interviews, I can tell you that much. That team was an interesting team because they were aloof. I'm being very polite in what I'm saying. But him, Bonilla, Van Slyke, they were all very, 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 very aloof, big time. And so and Leland was aloof, believe it or not, at the time. That's one of those weird things where you knew that you weren't going to do one-on-one interviews because you had to stick the mic because you knew those dudes weren't going to say much and they didn't want to talk. And so it was stick the mic in front of whomever, let him. I don't remember Bond speaking, to be honest with you. Um, I really don't. Not, I interviewed him a million times, but I don't remember him speaking after that game. Drebeck, it was Drebeck. Yeah, I think it was Drebeck that spoke. Stan Belinda, who was the pitcher, he spoke. I forget. I think Van Slyke, but there were very few dudes that would spoke. I mean, it was like they wouldn't let the press into that locker room for 15, 20 minutes until after the game ended because they were so devastated. They, I can only imagine what that room must have been like.
Hmm.
I mean, that's a great question. Trust me, I've had to do some really hard interviews in my life with some guys that are flaming assholes. Um, Eli Nastasi, the legendary tennis player. I covered him at a tennis match in Short Hills, New Jersey, a throwaway tennis match, and some young kid, a 16-year-old, kicked his ass. A kid named Jimmy Arias, who's retired by now, kicked his ass. And I had to interview Eli Nastasi afterwards. And trust me, his nickname was Nasty Nastasi. There's a reason for that. That guy was a flaming. I'm telling you right now. And to have to interview that dude one on one after a thing, that was awful. That was awful. And and so trust me, when you're in those situations, that ain't fun to do, but you got to do your job.
Hmm. Yeah, most definitely, Kevin. And you know, going back, to your
Yeah.
time at FSN, as a producer, how was it like putting the pre and post game show together?
Oh, fun. It was great. I was working with great guys, Stan Sabrin, Rob Novak, and of course, Rob King came in, and Rob and I clicked the day he showed up, right? Took him to a high school football game, Shaler North Hills High School football game, his first day, because he couldn't wait to see a high school football game in Western PA. And we stayed best friends since then. I had a chance, Roger Lenhart, who forever was down there. He's teaching at Point Park now. He's one of the top multi-Emmy Award winner. Sean McClintock, the station manager, brilliant. Paul Kasuth, who was station manager, general manager. He was, and then we were also partnered with St. Louis at the time. So I went out there and worked with St. Louis and Kansas City. Um, and so, yeah, John Veneman, Jim Hayes, who still does, covers the Kansas City Royals, who's out that way. I got a chance to work with people who are, again, uber talented, uber talented. And we had a lot of fun. Like that's what made it. It was so unique, but it was a lot of fun. It was a different approach towards sports because again, it's pre and post. And West Coast post games stink because the game is in at some crazy ass hours, right? But you still got to do a pre and post, right? But aside from that, it was again, it's the toy department of life, and 99.9% of the time, it's a happy ending simply because it doesn't matter if they win or lose, it's sports. And so that made it fun. And it was a lot of fun. I had the pleasure of working with very talented and really, really, really fun people.
And how was it like working with the athletes who transitioned to television after their playing careers, knowing that they were entering into a whole new world with
Yep.
broadcasting?
Yeah, they were scared out of their minds. And trust me, again, coming from the student athlete world event originally, here's what you know. They're going to give you every ounce of their being to get great at something. That's what athletes do. They don't know any other way. So they want to soak up every single thing. And it's interesting because I love that you said that because, from Troy Loney to Bob Airy, all these different athletes, especially at Pitt, Julius Page is doing the games, Julius, and all these different people, they really want to learn. I have a young girl right now. She may be she's a sophomore at Pitt who's on the basketball team. She may end up being the one of the top ESPN people in the next 10 years with her own show. She's elite. Audrey Biggs, who's only a sophomore, and she already has more experience than most people have after 4 years of college of working at a TV station and being on air. That's her dream, and she threw herself into that when she was in high school, and she has that work ethic and that drive. So she reminds me of those people that have made it on the air. That I had the chance to work with so many athletes. And again, athletes want to. You just tell them once, man. They want to perfect it. Period. You don't have to worry about that stuff.
And
Mhm.
Shifting gears, Kevin, to your time in the film industry. So, one of the main projects that people know you for is the 2007 film that you helped write called Pride. So, can you tell us how did the inspiration coming about wanting to tell Jim Ellis, the main character, where did the inspiration come from to tell his story?
All right. So this is hilarious. This is an interesting thing. So I'm a biopic. Well, I write a lot of stuff, but my main thing are inspirational biopics. Bam. So that's why first that. So I happen to be in Pittsburgh um for for some reason, I forget when. And EJ Borghetti at the University of Pittsburgh, who's known me since I played forever, calls me up and says, "Hey, listen, it's Walt Harris's birthday," who happened to be the football coach of Pitt at the time. He goes, "Why don't you swing by our facility? We're having cake for him, and it'd be great to have you." Yeah, it sounds cool. So I go down, see Walt, the guys. I didn't play for him, but I know many, many of his players, and through the years. And Walt's girlfriend is sitting at a table with me having cake, and they know I write I write film. She goes, "I got a great story for you." And I hate to say this, but I hear that every day, and I immediately go, "Oh God," right? Because if I had a quarter for every time somebody said that, I wouldn't have to write anymore. I wouldn't have to teach. I wouldn't do anything. I'd be on some island, right? And so she says that, and of course, I'm sitting there thinking, I got to sit there and listen to what she has to say because it's Walt's girlfriend. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm just gonna. It's white noise. It's gonna go in this ear, out the other. So she's telling me this story of Jim Ellis. Swear to God. And I'm like, yeah, that's nice. That's good. That's good. Great. Go back to eating cake. I was so happy because when I left, I'm like, good, got that shit good. I'm good to go. 2 days later, I get a manila envelope with Pitt football manila envelope in the mail. And I just figured, oh, I wonder if it's like alumni, some whatever it is, right? And it's Xerox copies of newspaper articles about Jim Ellis. And so I'm like, son of a bitch, now I got to go do research on this story because it's Walt's girlfriend. And I'm like, I feel guilty. And I'm like, ah. I call up and I finally get hold of Jim Ellis, who's in Philly. And Jim is an honorary guy, man. Like, he's not exactly Mr. Rosie, right? And I talk him into letting me come and hang out for a couple of days in North Philly at the pool. And he was so dismissive of me the whole time. Yeah, right. This is going to be a film. Yeah, right. And I'm like, whatever. But can I get your life rights for at least, 18 months so I can shop it if I write it? Okay, great. So I write the story, and I did it as inspired by, which is it's not inspired by means you take kind of like you capture the spirit of what he was trying to do because he had been coaching for 20 years. So I just took kind of an amalgamation of the kids he coached over the years. So I write the story. And fast forward to, I want to say it was in the fall. And a friend of mine named Mike Gosser, who's from Philly, he's a development exec in LA at a small company. He was in town in Pittsburgh to do a story in the Pittsburgh on the Johnstown flood. I said, Mike, stay at my place up in McCandless. And then you just drive over to Johnstown and you just stay here for, next 2 days. And he said, great. And Mike had to fly back to LA on a red eye on a Sunday night. And we're sitting in my kitchen Sunday evening. And I said, yeah, I'll drive you to the airport. But I'm sitting in my kitchen. And he's like, oh, man, I got to be in a production meeting tomorrow morning. And I don't have a script. I forgot I got to read a script. And in Hollywood, executive, you're a producer or you're working in production companies, your production meetings, different. Everybody brings in, like, you read a script over the weekend and bring in what you think and you pitch it and stuff like that. And he sees literally my script sitting on the kitchen table, like under a couple of things. He goes, what's that? And I said, it's this crappy script I wrote. And he goes, mind if I just read it on the plane and take it? Yeah, go ahead. I don't care. Nobody's gonna pick this thing up, right? I've written so many of these things. Nobody could grab this. So he calls me back Monday afternoon. And he goes, you know that script you wrote? The one you took? And he goes, yeah. The two guys that run my company love it, and they're taking it to Lionsgate tomorrow. Oh, that's pretty funny, Mike. That's hilarious. Tuesday afternoon, I get a call back. Lionsgate really loves it. They're going to option it from our company. Swear to God. And it was so crazy because I moved to LA like literally 2 months later. We were planned on it, but it just happened that's how it fell in. Actually, about 3 months later, and my wife and I moved to LA, and it was so funny because it just was that weird thing of coincidences that just happened. And the next thing you know, Lionsgate greenlit it. We got the director, Terrence Howard, Kate was coming off of Academy Award nomination for Hustle Flow. He had done, no, for Crash. He had done Crash as an Emmy or Academy Award nomination and Hustle Flow. And then he did our film. And I asked Mike Gozzard, since he's from Philly and the story takes place in Philly, I said, if I'd like to ask Lionsgate if I can bring you on as a co-writer, because you know Philly. And I want to make sure I get the language right, the sense of the city. And he goes, yeah. And so, that's next thing you know, I'm on set and they're making a darn movie. I'm hanging out with Bernie Mac.
And for anybody who is wondering what the film is about, make sure to go on YouTube, watch the trailer, and then go watch the film because it is a remarkable film.
That's sweet of you.
How was that? Well, of course, Kevin. How was that like, working with guys, the big names in the industry like Terrence Howard and the late Bernie Mac with your vision too? Yeah,
that was fun. It's so interesting because you're talking like from Mike Paschanik, who's the head of production at Lionsgate, to John Sackey, the executive producer. These are people that are, again, they're the Dan Marinos, they're the Scott Shannons, they're the Myron Cope, Bill Hillgroves. They're the best on the planet at what they do. And so I was a sponge, man. I was like, I want to learn everything I can from this. And it was great. It was incredible work with them. Terrence Howard, Terrence Howard has an engineering degree from Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, and he plays 7 instruments. I mean, think about that alone. Bernie Mac and I would sit when I would pop down. We were shooting in New Orleans, and I'd pop down a bunch of times, like a week at a time, to go on set, different stages. And Bernie Mac and I would sit on the place we're using for it was an old school for where the kids swim. We'd sit on the steps, and he wouldn't go back to the trailer. We would just talk about family, but I would pick his brain about the difference between television and film, and as for both acting and writing. And it was like a master class listening to somebody like that who not only knows both worlds, but knows live entertainment, but his timing on everything is incredible. And to talk about what timing is and how you can write timing, but it has to fit the actor, all kinds of stuff, and the difference in television. So I literally got a chance to be around these people telling me, they're giving me the cheat code to how to make films and TV. And so to me, I'm like, this is crazy that I get a chance to do this with this level of talent. And so it was a great experience. It was a really, really cool experience.
And when you were on set, Kevin, what was, for anybody who doesn't really know about how this works, what was it like to blend everybody together, of course, with you being the writer and then your producers, the directors and the writers? How was that like being on set and blending all of those pieces together to create this one thing?
Great question. It's a collaborative forum. It's just like sports. There's no one person. It's a team sport. There's no one person more important than the other. If you think about the audio people, right? The sound design and sound engineers. Think about an offensive lineman, right? If Steeler fans, sorry to tell you this, if you have a crappy left tackle, your quarterback's going to suck because the guy's running for his life, right? So the sound design guy better be damn good, or else all the different little sound of everything that you hear in sound design with Foley and all that, it ain't going to work. And the people who are the director who's looking at the various different shots, and the actors have to, time is money, and the reason that a movie is done in X amount of time because everybody's already signed up on different projects 2 months later. It's not like they're waiting around going, I wonder what I'm going to do next. No, everybody that's working there, from grips and gaffers, electrician, makeup, to actors, directors, they have the next 5 projects lined up and they're starting at a certain time. So that means you better get it right in that window of time that you have. So there's a tremendous amount of pressure at all times. So you're talking, again, it's no different than sports. It's all about being an expert and knowing that you have to do your best every single second. And so that was cool. For me, the greatest part, it's funny, Don Keyser asked me that years ago. I said, I got to tell you, the coolest thing is I sat in food services during lunchtime one day with the tent, everybody's tables lined up, everybody's eating, right? Because everybody does eat at the same time because you got to get back on set. And I'm looking at the extras that are from the local, the local people that are actors and stuff to the people from Hollywood, the crew and everything. And the most satisfying thing about making a film for me, and it still exists, something that was just an idea in my head. All these people are not only making money off of it, like they're working, but the other part is they're living their dream. And that's all from just, ironically, something I didn't want to write in the first place. But that's what the fun part is for me of being a writer, a screenwriter, a teleplay writer, and a stage play writer. That simple idea that's in my head can turn into something that people can make a living off of, but more importantly, they can live out their dreams. And that's an incredible opportunity that very few people ever get to do.
As somebody like me, Kevin, like yourself, who loves biopics and who loves historical movies, you mentioned it a little while ago. How is it like blending the true events of a story and also having to add some fiction to it as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's three levels. There's documentaries, which is basically play-by-play, if you think about it, because you're taking found footage to do a documentary. Think of Ken Burns, the greatest on the planet that ever existed to do documentaries, right? And telling story that way. There's based on. Based on is something that stays pretty much to the storyline and the structure of what happened with somebody. Based on is many films that you've seen that you would be surprised are actually biopics. But many films that you've seen, they're based on that person's life, and it stays true to the structure of the timeline. Inspired by takes the spirit of what they were doing and captures it. And believe it or not, here's a good example of something that stretches the border. Inspired by Braveheart, right? Which people forget that's a biopic of William Wallace, who is really the founding father of Scotland. It's not based on what he did because they made up the whole love story aspect of it and all that kind of stuff like that. Especially the love interest from the queen who, actually she wasn't the queen, she was the princess from France and all that stuff. They made up all that stuff. But the other thing is, think about this: the final battle scene. This is how you know it's inspired by the final battle scene where he's captured, basically, where he's betrayed. It's this big sweeping field, and you see all these soldiers running at each other on the horses, the whole works, and running at each other. That actual battle took place on a bridge that can only fit maybe 4 people wide, 6 people wide. That's where that battle, a little tiny bridge. That's their Gettysburg. That's Scotland's Gettysburg. Imagine if we told Gettysburg on a little bridge, like you did the movie. It would lose its impact. So to tell that story, you can't have that moment on some little bridge, which is the defining battle of a country. To that end, the people of Scotland got pissed off like there's no tomorrow at first, until the tourists started showing up. And then they were good with it. But nobody cares. I always try to tell myself, it's like Bunker Hill. We always learned about Bunker Hill when you're a kid. There was no fight on Bunker Hill. That took place on a hill called Reed's Hill, which was right by it. But Bunker Hill was the taller of the 2 hills. So that's how you would name the battles, type thing. So when you study history, I actually call it studying the past. History is told to the eye of the victor. So when you study the past and what actually happened, it's amazing the things that you can learn and the truth of why they exist and why they happen.
And when the film was finally released, Kevin, in 2007, how did it feel for you when you were finally able to sit down and watch your vision come to life on the big screen?
That's a really fun question. So I saw it 3 different times. The first time, Lionsgate, it was just about 6 or 7 of us. And when you walk into Lionsgate, as soon as you walk in over in Santa Monica, right to the left is a theater inside their building. And it was before the final cut of the film, but I was sitting a couple of seats away from Tom Arnold, who was in the film. And a cute little story. So we're watching it and I'm like, wow, that's pretty crazy. Like, it's just the fact that he's sitting by me and I'm watching it, right? He's playing a character called the Bink, the nemesis, right? The antagonist. And the Bink is actually named after my English teacher from high school, Richard Binkowski. He's my all-time favorite teacher. He was the toughest teacher I ever had. Had him twice. Really hard lit teacher. But in retrospect, those are the best teachers you ever have, right? And I remember telling it was interesting because Tom and I chatted about it. But I remember telling Mr. Binkowski, the Bink, when I asked him I can use his name, and I said, listen, I just made this character a real son of a bitch, and I wouldn't have it any other way, one of those things, right? But that was weird watching it then, and then the two premieres took place pretty much in the same week. One was in Philly. And that was cool because my mother's passed away. My mother and my aunt, her sister, came. Lionsgate got a limo for him, and that was cool because I didn't even walk the red carpet because that's not, believe it or not, that's not my style. I kind of got there early, just kind of grabbed the seat. They got to walk a red carpet and do all that stuff. Where you think about doing that for your family, right? That's just crazy, right? And so that was cool. And then the premiere out in LA was at the Directors Guild Theater on Sunset. And that's when Walt came out. Walt Harris came with his girlfriend. Pete Carroll came because Pete's Walt's best friend. They played college football together. And Pete's son was on a tight end for Pitt playing for Walt. And so he came. My family came out from Jersey. My wife's family came out from Pennsylvania. And just to see how much it was cool for them. Because, again, it's how often were you going to live that experience if you're them? And I remember my father-in-law, God rest his soul, Clint Eastwood came to watch it. And that's his favorite guy. And they were just one-on-one chatting afterwards about fishing and hunting and stuff like that. And I know that was for my father-in-law, who I adored. That was like a gift to him. And that the fact that Clint was there, Clint's son's in the movie. That's why, Scott Reeves. And so that's why Clint came. And so the fact that I had a chance to talk to him, but my father-in-law, like that was his moment. Like type thing. And so just, the give up, you get to let people live dreams out. I mean, it's a toy department. It's a fantasy world. It's, it's film, it's fake, but people get a chance it's escape, it's dreams and stuff like that. And to see people around you that you love and care about and just other people get to have those moments. That was phenomenal. And that's what the premieres, that's like you said, seeing the film for the first time. It's crazy to see what you can in your mind and, dialogue and different things. But to see the reaction of people around you is even better.
That is all phenomenal, Kevin. And going and fast forwarding to, what you're doing now, when did the opportunity first come to be a professor at Pitt in the Film and Media Studies department?
So we moved back from LA. My son was 13, about 8 years now, about 8 years ago. And we moved back because our families were back this way and they were aging. And so we sat there and said, listen, I'm good. I'm in a position now where I've established myself in LA. So wherever my laptop is, that's where my office is. And so my agent's out there and everything. So I'm in great shape. So let's move back to I'm familiar with Pittsburgh, kind of it's comfortable. North Allegheny was very interested in my son playing sports there for the sport he played. So, they had him come visit before we even moved. So, so we came back and I was on campus just to say hi to somebody. And they just had built the new Pitt studios. Actually, it was under construction. And they said, listen, would you have an interest in starting and designing the broadcast program here? And being under film and media and teaching some film classes. And I said, and they put a hard hat on me, walked me around, showed me the blueprints. I'm like, it's starting to get there. And the selling point was two things. I still have my summers off if I want, so I can do my writing. And two, it's starting something which at my alma mater, who I love my alma mater, it's given me opportunities of a lifetime to um, basically go back and create something that other kids can benefit from, like I benefited. And they gave me, like the administration gave me 100% support, the athletic department 100% support since it's working with the broadcast facility. And I got to start from a blank slate, and whatever I can come up with, no different than writing a film, is what it is. And sure enough, I had 15 students the first year. Those 15 went on to do, there's still Jason Earl, who's now the coordinating director of the ACC network, to Valkyrie Speaker, who is, she was the head of post-production for Dear Mama, the Tupac Shakur doc that ran on FX. So I had 15 ridiculously talented students. And it grew 155%. And now, the program's massive. A dear colleague, Lisa Johnson, who I was able to hire, who's my colleague in broadcasting. We had 3 students work the Olympics. One got an Emmy for it. I've had 19 students nominated for Emmys. Another student was the technical director for the Men's and Women's World Cup, 3 years out of college. I have students at CNN, to every station you can imagine, to professional sports teams, and you name it. So I've been very, very lucky because I've been handed, again, it reminds me of when I played at Pitt. It's easy to win when you get talent. I can tell you that much. It's a lot easier to win with talent than it is without it. And I've been given some unreal talent, and the facilities are the best in the country.
What has it been like for you, Kevin, to see this program, starting it from scratch and then growing it to what it has become today with so many students?
Yeah, I'm blessed. I think the goal is to make it a major in 10 years and to be the top broadcast school in the country in 10 years. We've already started, and it's funny, I'm competitive. My goal was, if I went around the country and checked out the top programs, and to me, the top program is KMOU at the University of Missouri in Columbia. Or not but the station, they're partnered with the station, an NBC station, KMOU, but the University of Missouri, because they own the Midwest. Their students go straight to St. Louis and Chicago and stuff like that. Northwestern, I think, has the greatest graduate program when it comes to journalism in the country. This may sound crazy. Newhouse, I thought they were once in their heyday at Syracuse, the best, but they benefited from ESPN signing on the air, and they needed human beings that knew how to do television. And that was the only school that really had a program like that. So they took advantage of it. I think we've passed them at this point, because I got a lot of their students that visited both and ended up coming to Pitt. So I like to flex on that one. And then I visited, NYU, Columbia. So I designed the program with little aspects of all of those. And I think we're in our 7th year now. I think in 10 years, not only will be a major, but we'll be the #1 broadcast program in the country. Like, unquestionably, I think I think we're close to it now, but in 3 more years, I think it's not even it's not even, I got to find a new goal, because that's not even challenging anymore.
And then with college football season on the horizon, Kevin, going back to what you said earlier on in the episode about you teaching an NIL class this fall. So, I know this might be a tough question now since it actually hasn't happened yet, but how do you feel about coaching this class, knowing that this is the day and age that we're already in college athletics?
Yeah. So I spent 3 years designing this course. So it's not something where, I better get something out there right now. And so I worked with Jason Grilli, the former Pirates pitcher, who wrote a textbook on NIL. And he's a dear friend of mine. And so Grilli and I worked with him to design a workbook and help him redesign he actually wrote the book, and then helped him redesign it to be a textbook. And then at that point, working off of that, I built the class out. But the thing was, I didn't want it just for athletes. And this is why it took so long. There's 2 parts to NIL. If you think about NIL, yeah, anybody has NIL. It's just name, image, and likeness. Kardashians to Joe Schmo. Anybody has NIL. You own your own name. Period. You can monetize it. So that's all it is. But athletes have a bigger platform, so they can monetize it more most of the time. So that's one end of it. But then there's the other end. There's the companies that would sponsor the athletes to give them the money. And they're just as blind about how the hell does this thing work? Right. So I wanted the class to incorporate from the athlete's perspective and from the company's perspective. And so I worked with Vlad Rack, who's the vice president and chief information officer at Dick's Sporting Goods, and to get what they would do if they had a person that specialized in bringing athletes on board representing Dick's. So from the business perspective, I worked with the 412 Alliance, which is the collective for the University of Pittsburgh, and some other small companies. And then I also worked with professional athletes to get their feedback. But then the thing I incorporated in the class was a wealth management company that specializes in NIL. They actually handle all of Penn State's football team. But I brought them into the class. In fact, the vice president of the company and the chief attorney that works with the athletes, they're actually going to be live in my class the first day of classes. Because the wealth management part is the part where it's not as, to understand what this is, it's not as simple as you get it. Like, it's not like you get an ATM card and just swipe it. And I want a car. It doesn't work that way. It's how do you, as Jason Grilli said, you're going to be out of the uniform a lot longer than you're going to be in it. So how do you take what you have now and make that almost generational wealth? And that's why the wealth management company is there. It's not just like, okay, here's what NIL is. It's no, you have an opportunity of a lifetime. And then I brought in Bob Lamieux, who is the president of Deloitte Touche, who specializes in taxes. And so these are all people that will be involved in the class, both live guests in Zoom and pro athletes every single week, so that the athletes then get a firsthand experience from and information just like I did from my mentors that I mentioned earlier. This is their chance to get it from the experts in those fields so that they don't screw it up.
And finally, one more question for you, Kevin.
Yeah.
Going back to watching Pride, one of my favorite quotes in the movie was, your name is the first thing you receive when you're born and the last thing people remember you by. So I was curious, what do you hope people remember the most about your name with the phenomenal things, the phenomenal life, and so many people that you have touched along the way?
That's a great question. By the way, that came from my sister used to always sign cards from birth to earth. And I said, that's interesting. But anyway, I thought about that all the time. I think about that all the time because I'm on the back nine of life here. And so the best way to answer your question is the fun way to answer it is this. On my gravestone, feel free to cremate me because I won't know. But on my gravestone, I really want to put, like, believe it or not, obladi oblada. And then see if people understand that's from a Beatles song. And see if people know what the rest of the song is. I think that's me laughing wherever I end up, right, after I kick the bucket. But to answer your question, I'll be very honest with you, and I've been asked this several times. I don't want to be known for what I did. I just want to be known for who I was. And by that, this may sound nuts. All the stuff I've had the opportunity to do, and I've been blessed to have many, many opportunities. Those things they're not even in the ballpark compared to what kind of person was I? How did I treat other people? How did obviously my family, my friends, but just people I don't know. And the other part is people that have absolute, completely different opinions and viewpoints as me, whether they're social, professional, political. Did I still treat them as humans? Like, that's the whole, like, to me, that's the only thing I want to be known for. I couldn't care less about the other stuff. That's sweet. That's cute. But again, the last thing I want on my headstone is never missed a day of work. I can tell you that much. So I just want to be known by who I was as opposed to what I did.
Yeah, and Kevin, thank you so much for your time and for taking the time out of your day to be with us here. You know, you have meant so much to my career. You really have touched me along your path.
Thank you.
So, Kevin, I can't thank you enough. This was such a phenomenal episode.
Well, I can tell you right now, you know, I'm not just a fan of yours. I get inspired by the things that you do. You know, it's funny. People have heard you on so many different broadcasts. They have no idea of the amount of work you do, research you do, traveling you do. Yeah, you're elite in this profession, and you're going to reach the highest levels of this profession because you not only have the talent, but you have the work ethic. And you're just a great human being. And again, you've heard about all these different people. You're right there with everybody. And that's what matters to me in life. Those are the people I not only cheer for, but I draw strength from. And so I'm the one that's lucky to see people like you, the next generation that is picking up right where Hillgrove left off, where Myrie Cope left off, and where Scott Shannon left off. That's you. And that's a great feeling to know that you're there and you're going to go beyond what all of us did because of your talent. And so thank you for having me today. And I can't wait I can't wait to convince you to talk to my students in class at some point. But it's an honor to be on your show. You know, voices in the game. You're right there with the greatest voices that are out there already.
Oh, thank you so much, Kevin. That means so much, my friend. I would love to talk to your class anytime.
Thank you, Colton. Appreciate it.